Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Meet the Farmer, week 4. And I'm quite impressed with myself that I set myself a goal to do these on a Tuesday at 3, and I have done 4 weeks worth, which is quite good. Normally I would procrastinate and think it was a good idea and not follow through. So today I figured, because it's a bit of a wet and grey day, that I would share with you about some of the variables in farming that aren't in our control. That means it's a very volatile industry to be part of, because we don't know what is going to happen or what's coming from one moment to the next, basically. So as I started on the weather, I shall continue on the weather. So if you've watched the Jeremy Clarkson videos, you will know that he came to the conclusion that if the weather wasn't right, he was stuffed. Because he was trying to get crops in the ground and things like that. And if it's too wet, you can't do that. And if it's too dry, they won't grow. And there's all these things, all these variables that are like to do with the weather in farming. So, for example, this year, so we have an issue where we are very drought prone. So we have a very free draining farm, which means at this time of year when it's raining loads, then we have minimal amount of mud compared to the wetter farms, but it will catch up with us in the spring. So if we have a dry, cold winter, which then rolls into spring, so you have a lovely, dry, sunny spring, we actually come to a point where our grass won't grow because we need lots of rain, because the water that may have been there through the winter hasn't been stored in our soil properly. So therefore it free drains, and then you get to spring and you want the grass to grow. And we all know that every living thing needs water. And if there's no water, the grass will it will maintain itself, but it won't grow to the extent that we need it to feed. So in the spring, you need sheep with baby lambs that need to go out on fresh spring grass. You've got cattle, we do, with baby calves that will need to go out. They go out a bit later. They tend to go out in May, whereas our sheep go out as soon as they can in February and things like that. We've also, in the past, been caught out with snow and freezing weather. So we don't get it very often that it snows, but there was a couple years, probably about 10 years ago, where it really snowed. And I remember we'd lost literally, like, all the sheep had gone to a hedge, and we had to go and find them because the snow had drifted in. And the silly things, they always go to the hedge where it drifts into. So whenever it snows and you have sheep in a field, you can guarantee they are under where the snow has landed. So if you get these drifts. So we had to go and find them and bring them in, and then we had to create space for them inside, which we didn't really have. They went into our machinery shed. We've also have it where we've not got a mains water supply here. So when it freezes, and I'm sure actually that mains water is probably designed that it doesn't freeze in the pipes as easily as what well water does, maybe because of the chemicals and stuff in it that they use for cleaning it. I'm not entirely sure on that, but anyway, so if it freezes, we are stuffed as well, because of course we need water, so we have to then work out how to defrost it and things like that. And there's this constant challenge when working with live animals. We have to serve our animals. We have to provide food for them. We have to provide clean water, because that's what we want for them. We love our animals. We appreciate the work that our animals do for us on this farm, the babies that they grow and produce for us. So we therefore want to make sure that they've got amazing food and water abundantly. But there are these challenges that can be thrown up when it comes to the weather. And if you're a farmer listening to this and you're on a wet farm, you have your own challenges. You know, you have shorter time where your cattle and sheep can be out in the field if it's really, really wet because it gets muddy. And so there's always this volatility, you know, when it comes to farming and the weather. And actually, I never noticed it before, but it causes an underlying stress all of the time. So you are literally, what's the weather going to do? What's the weather going to be like tomorrow? What's the weather going to be like next week? What's the weather? What's the weather? What's the weather? And I honestly feel that in times gone by, there would have been this feeling inside of you that you would have been able to go out and look at the sky and go, right, I think we can cut our hay today. I think we can cut the hay and it's going to stay dry for a week and we'll get the hay in and it will be fine. But that has actually, it feels like, been taken away from us because we're relying on computers more, we're relying on the weatherman to tell us the weather, and let's face it, they don't always get it right. And so it actually, it causes a lot of stress. What is the weather going to be? What is the weather going to be? So you get, you know, a lot of farmers, you know, farming circles that I'm part of and in, they're always talking about the flipping weather, you know, and I know lots of people talk about the weather in all sorts of industries, but I kind of started realizing that all this negativity around the weather wasn't making anything any better, particularly the way we felt. You know, if we look out the window and think, oh, it's raining, I don't want to go and do this and I don't want to go do that. I will hands up say I am a fair weather farmer. I will hands up, you know, and say that. If I don't have to go outside in this, I won't, which is my prerogative at the end of the day. And some of you watching this may think, oh, well, lucky her. Well, that's just a choice I've decided to make. As long as everything is healthy, happy, standing up on four legs and, you know, fed and watered, then why am I going to put myself through it, really? So the weather is a big factor, and the stress that causes, you know, and I'm really, really seeing, particularly in this era and this time that we're living in, the amount of stress that there is in farming families, and how for years we've lived under these stressful environments. You know, as a child, I can remember so much conflict and discussion, and, you know, because the weather wasn't freaking right. And actually, I asked myself the question a few years ago, if I keep cursing the weather, do I just make it worse anyway? You know, what if I'm just thankful for whatever weather we get, and it actually, just the thankfulness changes it? Maybe it changes it just in my mind and in my thought process, or maybe it changes it in the atmosphere. Who knows? Maybe we're so connected and interconnected with everything that's alive that we're actually supposed to say, you know, actually, we need better weather, and I'll be thankful for the weather I've got, but maybe we can get dry weather when we need dry weather and wet weather when we need wet weather, instead of cursing it all the time and going, friggin' weather, it's raining again. We're always cursing it, you know. So it's an interesting thing, and I'll just throw that out there because it's for a lot of people that would be a bit woo, but actually there's a lot of things we don't know about the environment, about nature, about how we're connected, and we're all interconnected. You know, we all need water to live. So is water the interconnecting force, and this, you know, the invisible stuff that's constantly going on that we have no idea about. So another element that we aren't in control of, and this has always been my why is this like this? So you may or may not know that when a farmer produces a product, so whether we've got wool, whether we've got beef, lamb, and possibly other products as well. Milk's slightly different because milk has contracts often, but for the wool and the beef and lamb, we don't often have a contract. So we therefore never know what we are going to get for our product at the end. So I'm yet to find another industry that actually doesn't have a clue if they're going to make any money, if they're going to make a profit or not. You know, so the company that I'm part of, the skincare company that I'm part of, I always use this analogy because it makes sense to me. So they would create a cleanser, a smoothing cleanser, and they would know exactly what ingredients are in that cleanser. They would know exactly how much the packaging costs. They would know exactly how much it costs to send it to a customer, and all those things. They would know exactly how much it cost. They would then be able to put their profit margin on it, the profit bit, so that every cleanser they sell, they make however much money they make, right? Every industry that creates a product, whether it's toys, whether it's technology pieces, whether it's machinery, cars, all other industries apart from farming we never have a clue what we are going to sell our product for. So it changes from week to week. Lamb this year has been really high, so we've been getting £6 a kilo, but that can actually drop down to about £3.50, £3.70 in one season. So that can be like from January to late summer. So the price could be from £6 to £3. That's a big difference when it comes to making sure that you've made some money and things like that. It's the same with beef. We never know what our beef is going to make until the day that we send them, and you're going to get £3 whatever 50 or £3.60 a kilo today, but actually tomorrow it could be different. And also when it comes to beef and lamb, they're graded by so in the abattoirs that I've visited, it's always been graded by a human. So the human decides whether it's it's an E or a U or an R or an O or a P grade. So that is the confirmation, how much meat is on the carcass. So that grade has to happen, and that is done by a human. It has been in the abattoirs that I've visited. They are also graded on how fat they are. So if an animal doesn't have enough fat or has too much fat, when we send it to the abattoir, we get deducted. So we don't get paid for that. If it's too heavy, we don't get paid for that. When it comes to lambs, when they're over a certain weight, we don't get paid for that. So if we allow them to get too heavy, if they are too light, we get deducted for that as well. If we don't get them exactly to spec, we actually end up losing money, and they'll take it off. So although it might be, say the beef is £3.50 a kilo, if they are too fat, we'll get deducted 10 or 15 pence a kilo. And that doesn't sound a lot, but actually over a whole bullock, that's quite a lot. So we don't get paid per rata. If we mess up and we miss it, then that's our problem, and that's always been a point to me of why is that? Why have we even allowed that to happen? The wool industry this year, wow, that's just ridiculous now. So we're all wearing plastic. We're all wearing plastic, basically fibres. And there we have sheep. So our sheep aren't a wool breed, but they still grow wool. And it's better for them that we clip them so that they don't get maggots and things like that, because maggots in a sheep is horrible for them and horrible for us having to deal with it. It's horrid. So we shear the sheep, particularly the sheep, because lambs have a different kind of coat. So we just clip the lamb's tails normally if they get dirty tails. And so we've got this byproduct of animal welfare, because we're doing it to improve their welfare, make sure they don't get too hot and blah, blah, blah. And we get nothing for it. So last year we got £13 for our wool. It costs us, I think, £1.50 a sheep to shear it. So we made a huge loss there. The wool board, or the wool industry, was actually what got this country rich in times gone past. In the Victorian times, it was wool that was actually selling in the thousands, and it's what, you know, created this country's wealth. And now we make nothing on it at all. So we're putting effort and everything into to taking the wool off the sheep and to keep them healthy and to, you know, and actually we don't get anything back from that. So it's just time and effort, not well spent because you're not earning from it. So so this whole idea of the market, you know, many consumers, many of you may not have a clue that the price you pay for your beef and your lamb and your chicken and your pork, 'cause I'm sure it's all industries, I just know more about beef and lamb, the price you pay isn't what it costs plus a bit of profit. The price you pay actually means that we are normally working to a loss. So most of us who sell beef and lamb would be working to a loss. And the only reason I know this is because I've sat down and worked out the figures, and I didn't really want to do that because I knew it was going to throw up some horrible things. It was going to throw up that we aren't making money in our beef and lamb. That's the sad reality of it. So people will always want beef and lamb. You know, I was challenged last night by someone, well, why don't you just give up? What's the point in carrying on? What's the point in carrying on farming? And my answer was, because I'm a 5th generation farmer and someone somewhere in my family has worked their ass off to make sure that we are here, that we have this amazing space to live on. I'm going to get upset, but I was born here, you know. Somebody somewhere has had to work incredibly hard to make sure that I have the privilege of being here. And so why then would I give up on what is so important to me? Because I feel it's so important to honour those family members who have worked for me to be here. It's not for me to then say, oh, I'm just going to give up. It doesn't work. I'm going to give up because there has to be a way. There has to be a way. And, you know, from what I can see, this is our personal farming experience, the way I can see it, the way I look at it as an entrepreneur, because that is what I was destined to be, a businesswoman. I've always been destined to be that. From what I can see, the main reason that we struggle is because we've never been taught how to run businesses. We've never been encouraged to have a business plan. We have always just relied that there will be a government payment there that is going to bridge the gap between what it costs and what is being paid, you know, in the shops. And we've always relied on that. For a long time, we've relied that the government will just give us money. Well, in the next 4 to 5 years, that money isn't going to be there anymore. They aren't going to give it to us and they aren't going to pay us. So it's therefore, for me, that's then up to us to make the decision to say, right, we need to do something. We need to look at something else. We need to do whatever. And at the moment, the government, again, have released some money to go into certain companies. So we're doing it through AHDB, which I never know. I don't actually know what that stands for, but you can Google it. AHDB is something that we farmers pay into. We pay a levy into it, and they are there to help us resource our farming to become a better business, basically. And they are offering to do half-day business consultancy at the moment. So we've actually got a business consultant coming tomorrow to talk to all of us, Mum, Dad, Andrew and I, to discuss what is working on our farm, what isn't working on a farm, and what the hell we are going to do in the next 5 to 10 years. Because I don't want to give up, and I don't think the others do too either. I don't think they want to either. And so It's therefore so important, you know, if you're watching this today and you are a generational farmer like me, don't give up. Don't give up. Because there has to be a way. And I feel like we've built up so many walls and we've become so scared. We've become so scared to move out of our comfort zone, to push forward, to try something new, because it's been so familiar. We have lived in this familiar bubble for so long. Oh, the money will always be there. The government will always just keep funding it because they want cheap food. They want cheap food. So the government will just, well, now the government are like, well, actually, we can't do that anymore. Because it's public money for public goods. You know, it's taxpayers' money that goes towards paying us. You know, so it's just a catch-22. But I'm determined to find the answer. You know, I'm 33. I've got several years to work it out. And I would like to think that by the time it's time for me to go, that I have worked it out to be sustainable, we're still here. That is my, you know, that's my ultimate thing. I want to still be here. So that's kind of a little bit on the markets and what we aren't in control of, because so many of you don't have a clue about any of that. Because it's kept quite hush-hush, funnily enough. And the things that are important often are kept hush-hush. And so it is something that I feel that consumers need to hear and need to learn about. The other thing that isn't in control, some other things are, so we can't control animal behaviour. So if we are ever in a situation where one of our cattle decides it's going to go AWOL, it will go AWOL. We are very fortunate here on this farm that because Dad handles our cattle every day or goes and sees them every day, he's with them every day, they are quite calm, and you can work with them, you can move them and bring them in and things like that. So it's not so bad. But there are some animals that just don't like behaving like that, and they will kick up a stink. And when it's like 1,000 kilos worth, it can be up to 1,000 kilos worth of cow or bull. Our bull is 1,200 kilos. It can be difficult at times. So we always have to be aware, we have to be vigilant all the time that, you know, they are still animals at the end of the day. They can still decide. Mum and Dad this year got caught out. We had a cow that calved, and this cow has never gone for anybody before, but this particular time, obviously her hormones were high and she wasn't in the place to have anybody in and around her. She'd actually had twins and one of them had died, so they'd had to take the twin out, and she was not happy, and she was actually went for both my mum and Dad. Now that is a very rare thing that happens on farm, but I want you to see that we're always working in this environment where the animals are volatile and we don't know what they're going to do and we don't know how they're going to be reacting, and actually for us we're in that dangerous environment. You know, every week it feels that there is an article in the Farmers Weekly or the Farmers Guardian speaking to us about another on-farm death. It is one of the most dangerous industries there are out there for a multitude of reasons. One of the biggest ones, I think it is, and this isn't spoken about very often in farming circles, but one of the biggest reasons I think there's so many accidents on farm is because everyone's always so tired. And that's because we haven't learnt to take those breaks. We haven't learnt to step away from the farm, or we haven't learnt to have holidays at home, because we are 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We are constantly farming, living the farming life every single day. And we therefore get strung out, we get tired, and that's when we make mistakes. We make mistakes like we have a hanging piece of clothes that is, and we don't turn the tractor off, so they get caught around the PTO shaft, and wow, many people have died that way. That's not good, Other things where the tractors haven't been turned off and pieces of machinery have literally eaten farmers. They've fallen in it or they've gone in it, and just horrendous things. So it's not just the animals either that cause the danger, it's the environment that we're constantly in. In the summer, if you ever see contractors on the roads draying in hay, silage, corn in the summer, those contractors have often been working really long hours to fit into the weather pattern again. So we're constantly relying on the weather. So whilst it's sunny, everyone's out and everyone's doing everything. So you end up with contractors and tractor drivers who are tired. So when you're tired, your brain isn't working fully, and that's when accidents happen. And I honestly think that sleep deprivation, the anxiety of being a farmer, being stressed out quite often, well, actually all the time, I actually feel that we have a culture of being stressed all of the time, and we've become so familiar with that feeling that we don't actually even realize that we're stressed all the time. This is something that I'm really working on in myself, because I'm starting to feel at different times I can be really peaceful and believe that everything's going to be okay and it's fine, and then the next minute I'm stressed to the hill and can't organize my life very well at all. So there are these things, that happen in farming that cause stress. So mentally then we're struggling, and it just causes accidents to happen. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that there are accidents on farm. The other one is that there are certain rules we have to abide by. So I've put here, so one of the government rules we've got is TB testing. We have to TB test. The jury's out in my mind whether it's the right thing we should be doing, TB testing. So TB testing so we haven't had an active case of TB on this farm, praise God, for 20 years. We've had one cow that went down because we brought her on, and I think the stress has so much of an impact on the immune system. The stress of moving away from her lifetime home onto our home and then coming in, being with different cattle was just too much for her. It lowered her immune system, and the TB took over, basically. She did have TB, she did have lesions, but we went clear for the next 2 tests. So once you test, all of your cattle, every single animal has to be tested every year. If you go down, it then has to be tested every 90 days. So you then have to go into this TB testing kind of cycle. So you test it for every 90 days then after the test that you've gone down. There are people who have been TB testing their entire life. They don't know any different than TB testing like every 90 days for a long time. And there are people like us who are blessed enough that we only get TB we only do the test every 12 months because we don't have an active problem with TB. We are in the middle at the moment of our TB afternoon pool. We're in the middle of our TB test this afternoon, or today. Yesterday they tested the cattle, and then on Thursday we shall go through them and check to see if they have any lumps. And then they have to be measured, and if they're too big, then it's normally that they are said to have TB, and we then have to take that animal to abattoir, and that can be devastating for those who go down in big numbers. They're also doing other tests now, gamma tests, which is like blood testing for TB tests, and that can wipe out whole herds at a time. And you can imagine that somebody who's built up a herd, maybe a pedigree herd or something like that, particularly in the dairy industry, that could be completely devastating to a farmer to have to literally cull all of their animals. So it does go into the food chain because it doesn't have an active, issue within human beings. But a lot of the cattle don't actually have any TB in them. They've just reacted to the test. And for me, I wonder if all this testing has actually given it to them, but I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. But it's coming now that TB testing is going to have to happen every 6 months. I think, I'm not sure if it's clarified yet, for those who have been and had a TB outbreak in the last 6 years. So for us, we might get away with it carrying on with the 12 months. We'll have to see how this TB test goes. But it can be devastating. It's something we have to do. There is no vaccine for TB. There is obviously the badger coal kind of stuff that's happened, and who knows whether it's going to have any positive effect. I don't really know, and I don't really want to pass any judgment on it either, because I don't know enough about it. Does it all come from badgers? Is it coming from deers? You know, rabbits can get TB, all sorts can get TB. It's kind of one of those things. But is it just that every cat, you know, like us, you know, we can carry these things around in our body? Is it just that every animal has got TB in them because they've picked it up somewhere, and it's not until they have a stressor that their immune system drops, and all of a sudden the TB's like, whoop, we've got a route in, and then it goes rife. You know, for me, I feel that that's probably a big part of it. You know, if animals are stressed out and not having, you know, good health and things like that. So that's you know, government rules we have to abide by. I did another video last week about a bit more about that. And then I've written disease outbreaks, you know, BSE back in whenever it was, the 80s, I think. Then there was foot and mouth disease back when I was about 14, when that happened. And all these kind of diseases that happen on farms that you may or may not be aware of. So we can get abortion storms in sheep, where basically if they get infected, they could lose all their lambs, so you can end up having loads of dead lambs. You can get things like neospora, which is, again, it's on the ground. It's normally passed through dogs, foxes included. So if anything's got neospora in their poo, and they poo on our land, and the cattle then go and pick it up, they can get neospora, and it causes them to abort their babies. BVD is another one where the cows can abort their calves, or sometimes they can be born with really horrible deformities like 2 heads or holes in heads and just all sorts of things. So, you know, that's another disease. So farmers have really been through the mill when it comes to diseases. You know, COVID is a disease that's affecting humans, but actually farmers are battling nearly every day with some form of disease. And, you know, I've done other videos on why I feel that is, you know, that you can check out. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I did one about minerals and how our soils are lacking in minerals. Is that the reason why we are so susceptible to these diseases in animals now? Who knows? But we're always battling something. There's always something that we have to be mindful of, something we have to be aware of. Again, causing a lot of stress. And because we live in our jobs and we live on farms, that it all culminates to create this very kind of volatile, stressed environment that, unless we put in boundaries and we learn new boundaries of how to protect ourselves, how to protect our own health, how to protect our mental health. This is all things that I've literally been teaching myself in the last 7 years. Okay, I need to make it that, yes, I live here, but actually there is a bit where I have to detach from my job. I have to detach and not be so involved, because otherwise it can swamp you and it can make you feel like, oh my God, when is this going to end? And that, I feel, is a big place for the farmers at the moment. You know, we've got other issues going on where, you know, there's so much lobbying against us to say that we're causing all the greenhouse gas issues, that we are the cause of, you know, there's not enough carbon dioxide to package food at the moment because we're not buying artificial fertiliser. So artificial fertiliser's gone up now, but everybody wants us to stop using artificial fertiliser because actually that causes a greenhouse gas and it's killing our soil, which releases the carbon because the soil's dead. And so there's all these things that seem to be coming back on us that we're accused of and blamed of. And it's meaning that now, on top of everything else we're having to manage with, you know, if you've got sick people in your family, now we're even more in this place of what the heck are we going to do? What the heck are we going to do? And that's where we need to start speaking. I feel that we need to start talking. We need to start sharing these things, because it's not getting any easier. And I feel like we need to come together, team together. Consumers and farmers work together. You know, start buying local food. I know we'll keep saying it, but that's what needs to happen. You need to find a farmer who's growing everything, or some of the things that you need, even if you just add in a few things. You know, because the shelves in the supermarket have been empty this year or last year. And at the end of the day, if you've got a farmer 10 miles away that's producing food that you can feed to your family, and the supermarket can't provide it because there's no HGV drivers or there's no supply because they can't get it into the country, then go to the farmer down the road. And I know that's not always easy for some of you, but maybe that's just pushing us now. It's pushing us to say, right, maybe we need to set up farmers markets. Maybe there needs to be these little pockets right the way up through the country where we farmers come, we bring our products, setting up some online courses, maybe doing some on-farm courses to teach people about farming, the basics. And, you know, I don't hold nothing back. I don't lie about anything. It's the way it is, because I feel that telling the truth is what's needed nowadays. Yeah, and thanks for tuning in.